question?
Do you have a sense that this team is wanting to accomplish more after winning the ACC, only just getting to the regionals last year? Do you feel like this team wants to do more coming in this year?
Well, obviously we're going to build off a lot of great lessons from last year's team and last year's accomplishments. We won an ACC championship. 24 out of our 44 wins were come from behind. So I think it really exemplified the toughness of our team last year and the message of our team every day, which is to compete every pitch, practice as hard as you can, pitch by pitch, rep by rep. We're very process-driven in our program, and I think our guys really bought into that last year, and that's something we can build upon this year. And I think from an expectation standpoint that our expectations are very, very high in how we practice and how we play the game. We had a great year last year, but we did end our season right here at Clemson in a regional. We did not win our regional. We didn't advance to the super regional round with the opportunity to be 2 games away from going to Omaha. So as great as a year last year was, and I'm so proud of last year's team and all the guys that are returning, the one message is and we had a great year last year, but we ultimately didn't wind up where we wanted to be. So the guys have come back with a chip on their shoulder. They're very hungry to get today started, to compete against each other, and 3 weeks from now we will start our season against somebody else in the other dugout. So expectations are high. I think our guys are ready to go, and we're very excited about today.
How does it change the way you coach your team when you have a team that had success, gets over a major hump in the ACC, and then kind of has a disappointing finish?
It doesn't change how I coach at all. I think that every team is different, every year is different, regardless of how many guys you return. I think the biggest difference is the things that are important to us as coaches. I think the message is a little bit easier to get across this year. Last year's team did an unbelievable job of buying in, but it was a transition. Now, it was a transition for me, a very exciting one that I really embraced and enjoyed getting to know the kids on last year's team and trying to implement, kind of the way we wanted them to do things. I think this year is just a little bit easier to get that message across because a lot of the guys are in year 2 and they kind of understand how I want them to practice and how I want them to play and what's important to us as coaches. And they police the team better. Now, that's one thing with our leadership council. You had 6 players voted on our leadership council, 3 position players and 3 pitchers. And, I don't have to send that many messages anymore. Those guys are taking our message as coaches and doing it themselves. Pat Krall and Charlie Barnes and Eubanks, they're the leadership council of our pitchers. And, those guys are going to tell the pitchers, this is what we expect. These are our expectations with what we do every day. And Pender, Chris Williams, and Andrew Cox, and that's our leadership council on the position player side. And those guys are going to make sure that the position players are doing all the things that we expect of them as coaches. So it's just I think it's a little bit of a different feel just because there's more ownership this year because they understand what the expectations are a little bit better.
7 ACC teams in most of the preseason polls. Is it just a reaffirmation of the ACC's the top baseball conference in the country?
Well, it was the number 1 RPI conference in the country last year, and from what I'm hearing, there's a lot of teams that are even better this year. So we know how good the ACC is. It's a great league. I don't look at the polls that much. I really don't pay attention to the polls that much, and the reason being is I just kind of care about what we do. The preseason polls, they're very nice when it comes to recruiting. To use all that, all the accolades in the preseason that you're getting in the recruiting world. But for our team, we don't necessarily care so much about where we're ranked at the beginning. It's how you finish. It's where you're at the end of the year that matters. I think that the one thing, about last year's team and the returning players is we're far more respected this year. And you can tell that by the rankings. But we don't look into that too much. I haven't made mention of any preseason ranking to our guys, and at the end of the day, it doesn't really matter to me where we're ranked at the beginning of the year. It's how we finish, and it's how we prepare every day. We just want to dominate every single day. That's all we really care about.
When you've got Louisville one week and Florida State the next and NC State the next, does that strengthen you, or does it break you down a little bit, or what's the result of that?
Well, we got Wright State first, and we got to play each other first, and then we play Wright State for a 3-game set, and then we got Western Carolina after that. And the old cliche, we play them 1 game at a time. I truly believe that. I truly believe that the opponent is the baseball. That's the opponent. We don't care who the other opponent is in the other dugout. It doesn't matter what color their uniform is. The only thing we're going to do is we're going to look at our opponent's strengths and weaknesses, and we're going to try to find a way to combat that and try to win that ball game. But we don't necessarily care. There's no big games at Clemson. They're all big, and that's how we just prepare. Every single opponent is the same to us. On defense, you play the ball. Wherever the catcher sets up, you throw the ball. Regardless of who's in the box hitting, at the end of the day, you got to defend the baseball, and you got to hit the baseball, and you got to catch and throw the baseball. So we play the baseball at Clemson.
How much more of a comfort level, though? You say from the outside looking in, maybe you're more respected. How much more of a comfort level, knowing what you have in the middle of the lineup, knowing what you have in the pitching staff, do you have?
Well, last year at this point, I think Charlie Barnes had 1 or 2 career starts. Paul Campbell had 1 career start, and Clayton Schmidt had 6 as a junior. So we were returning, I think it was 6-1-1 or 6-2-1. You could look it back, maybe 7-2-1. I know Henny knows. But I know this: we returned less than 10 starts on last year's team. This year, just between Crawl, Barnes, and Eubanks, we returned about 250 innings. So just, in that regard, we got 3 guys that threw a significant amount of innings. You look at, we got a 5th-year senior who transferred in here, Tyler Jackson, who threw statistically better than any pitcher that we had this fall. He's got a lot of experience. Brooks Crawford threw significant innings as a true freshman, along with Riley Gilliam. Paul Campbell's back and better. Pat Andrews is healthy and is throwing the ball really, really good. So when you just look at just purely on our returners, we've got some depth and some experience, and positionally we've got some experience. So I think there's comfort in experience. I think that you definitely know, kind of what to expect out of those guys when they toe the rubber and they run across the dirt for the first time. The anxiety and the pressure and all that stuff's not going to get to those guys. Simply because they've been there, they've done that, and they've got some stripes on their sleeve.
Speaking of comfort, you had last year a lot of unknowns. They didn't know how you would react in games. You didn't know about them. How big is it now to have that year under your belt, and they know what to expect, you know what to expect?
The expectations with how we practice are even higher. I think that's the big thing is the expectations are even higher. I felt like last year we were really trying to teach guys how to practice and how to do certain fundamentals the way that we wanted them to do them. And the way that we played was a byproduct of that. I think this year the expectations of doing everything at a high level is even greater. We're not having to introduce how we, when we get in the box, what our approach is, what our approach on the mound is, how we play defense, how we run the bases. Those expectations are there. They're ingrained in the players, and they understand the importance of them. I think the other thing that stands out about this team is the mentality of this team. And the culture of this team is being established. That foundation has been established. So I think all in all, the expectations for our guys is higher because they understand the way that we want them to practice and play, and they are doing it at a high level. The bottom line is our players will police themselves. If we got a player that's not doing things the way that we want them to do it, I don't necessarily have to say anything. Somebody in the upper class will.
Now that the league has kind of a book on Seth, you anticipate, or is your sophomore slump, do you anticipate having to kind of coach him this season for what it's like now, the second time around? Have you ever had a player maybe that had such a great breakout year and then the next year had some bad?
Well, I mean, the big thing, for us with Seth is Seth just needs to be Seth. Seth just needs to just be himself and stay within himself and not try to do too much. We talked to Seth a lot about, remember who you are and not what you did. And don't focus on what you did. Remember who you are. Why are you a good player? You're a good player because you're a young man of high character that puts the team first, that prepares as good as any player out there, that works extremely hard and wants to help his team win. Don't go out there every day and think to yourself, I'm Seth Beer, the National Player of the Year as a true freshman, and I have to prove something. You don't have to prove anything to anybody. I just want Seth to be Seth and not worry about Seth, what he did last year. I just want him to be him. The good thing about